This episode of Horsepower Heritage is sponsored by Model Citizen Diecast. No matter what's in your garage, you can fit all your automotive heroes on a shelf. And they've got you covered, whether it's 1/43rd scale, 1/18th scale, or even the ginormous 1/8 scale masterpieces from the Amalgam Collection. Go to modelcitizendiecast.com and get 10% off when you use the promo code HERITAGE at checkout. Limitations apply. From race cars to street cars and everything in between, it's Model Citizen Diecast, because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick, and greetings to all of you listening far and wide from places like Rutherford, New Jersey, Somerville, South Carolina, Steubenville, Ohio, Warsaw, Poland, Seoul, South Korea, and Aveiro, Portugal. Thanks for joining me for another look at the people and the stories behind the machines, and I hope that you're getting out there and enjoying your machine, whether it's got 2 wheels or 4 or maybe even 3. It's that time of year again when you just want to enjoy great driving, right? And even with gas prices what they are right now, just go easy on the pedal. Slow cruising is where it's at right now, I guess. And don't forget to click that follow button, and please leave me a 5-star rating and a review, because that really helps new listeners discover the show. And it wouldn't hurt to tell your friends about the podcast either. I would love that. By the way, I got a note from a listener this week, and I wanted to share it with you. He said, "Love the show. Keep it up. Your effort shows in the podcast. I could study a whole day easily on each episode. You boil it down efficiently, and the result is a tasty espresso." Well, thanks for that. I love hearing from you guys. And if you want, you can reach me on Instagram at Horsepower Heritage, or just go to the homepage at horsepowerheritage.com, click the contact button there, and that's really all there is to it. And you can support the show at buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and contribute as little as $2, and that's a big help. All right, well, now that we've got that out of the way, let me tell you about today's guest. Nicolas Hunziker is a fine artist whose almost lithographic style is immediately recognizable, as are the subjects of his paintings. And a lot of his work is large format, big enough to fill a wall. It literally makes a huge impression. So from Jaguar C-Types to 911s and Shelby Cobras, he pays tribute to the icons of motorsport and high performance, and his work has been commissioned by a long list of heavy hitters like McLaren, Ford, and Porsche, as well as private collectors who share in his romance of racing. Nicolas admits he's obsessive about his art, but beyond the art and his own efforts on the racetrack, I think you're going to be very surprised by our discussion, because he was very frank about his lifelong battle with mental health, which nearly cost him his marriage, and he was also very open about the process of understanding what was going on inside his own head for many years. And you know, we all struggle at times, don't we? And it's the hardest thing in the world sometimes to look at yourself. So I have to tell you, I have the utmost respect for Nicolas, and I think you will too. I spent a day on location with him in his studio, surrounded by cars and art, and you can find the full video on my YouTube channel, by the way. Just search for Horsepower Heritage, and don't forget to subscribe over there too. And one more thing, while you listen, check out his website at nicolashunziker.com. There's a link in the show notes. Just click on that, because if you haven't seen his art yet, you're going to love it. So without further ado, here's my interview with Nicolas Hunziker, right here on Horsepower Heritage. Let's hit it. Well, Nick, here we are in your studio.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's impressive. You know, once again, I say this with a lot of guests when I come into the inner sanctum, but you know, everywhere you look, there's some cool detail. I'm really excited to talk to you today about your passions, both art and cars, and how they've merged over the years. Something that struck me when I read your bio is that your family's immersed in art, has been for many years, and I immediately thought of Ettore Bugatti.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
I mean,
yeah, that was a generational business too. You know, he had car designers and artists in the business. My family, I'm the 4th generation fine artist, but actually my grandfather did paint some cars as well, for clients, like, you know, cause his stuff was, kind of the Art Deco style. So, which is kind of the style that I emulated. So in the 30s, you would have these advertising posters. So he did some cars, and I think, well, I know that's kind of that has been my inspiration when I started painting. But yeah, I mean, I think, lots of it from kind of the hand-me-down heritage, or, we used to joke we all have a bit of pain in our blood. I think just now I start to realize that a lot of the little things that I've picked up over the years were things that I just saw my dad do when he was sketching, or, I mean, it goes a little bit into the weeds, but even just, the way you place certain letters next to one another, stuff I picked up from my grandfather, just in terms of, because he had these, I mean, I don't want to call them rules, but it's just, observations he's had over the years when he was working. He's written them all down in books, and I have them now, so I can go through it, and it's just kind of like stuff that you absorb. So sometimes I think, it's a bit like when you have a dynasty or a family of race car drivers, where they just kind of end up picking up stuff you don't really know where it comes from, but it's just kind of, oh yeah, of course you do that. That's just, everyone always did that. Yeah, so you don't, or like golfers who just, his dad was a golfer and then he started playing golf, so you just kind of pick up things. It's just kind of organic. So
yeah, it sort of becomes part of the institutional memory.
Yeah, it is. You don't really know why you're doing it, but it's just like, oh, that's just how we do it. And I think it helped, me, or just in general, because I know, the other day we had someone here who was, I think there was a daughter. She was 16, and her dad was, I think it was an engineer, and she's really interested in art. So a friend of mine said, hey, can they come over? And then when they came over, it's not so much she learns how to do things. It's really more that I think it was good for the dad to see, oh my God, this can be a career, because in his mind, it's numbers and you get an engineering degree and, and for her, she doesn't really fit in that world. So in our family, if you say, oh, I'm going to paint for a living, nobody would go, that's a hobby. That, that's crazy. But for other people, if you tell them, oh, I'm getting an art degree, it's like, yeah, good one,
Yeah, get a job, right?
Get a real job. So I think it helps from that point of view, that the attitude is kind of, that it's fostering, that, it's supportive. And I think it's the same when you have race car people or golfers, where it's not such a hindrance or an obstacle when you say, I want to do this because I'm passionate about it.
Let's talk about your childhood. You grew up in Switzerland?
Yes, first 18 years.
And your family, it's a European family, but it's also a melding of...
Yeah, it's weird, like the United Nations. So
yeah,
my dad is half Swiss, half German. My mother is half Japanese, half Thai. And so her mother's sister was was married to the king of Thailand at the time. So she was Queen Rampai, and my grandmother was, I don't know, maybe a princess she was like the 13th child of the second wife. So the joke in the family is she got the hand-me-down Rolls Royce that always broke down on the way to school.
And your great uncle, I think, was Prince Bira?
Yeah, he was the first Thai Formula One driver. So he started racing in the 30s, pre-war. So back then you had voiturette racing, which was kind of turned maybe into Formula 2, kind of. And he won the very first Monaco Grand Prix. And he raced before the war. He was probably, in those days you had Dick Seaman and, ERA's first supercharger. And so obviously the war came along, and then after the war they picked it up again, and he raced for Maserati. He had a 250F, and I think his last Formula One race was 54 French Grand Prix.
Yeah, when I was reading about him, of course, the history books will tell you that he was a man of small stature, and other drivers wondered, is he going to be able to handle these cars? Because the steering and...
Yeah, because, in those days, like the Argentinians were kind of like Froilan Gonzalez. He was a, hefty bloke.
Right.
And, fair enough, in those days, you didn't have You didn't have power steering. You had drum brakes. It was super hot in those cars, loud. Elements, radiators right in front of you. You get the hot air coming in, which is, by the way, why the pants initially were cuffed on the bottom, so the hot air wouldn't get up your pants.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So I think he was small in stature, but I think again, I think if you have passion for something, and to be fair, in those days also the means to race, because in those days we were still talking about gentleman racers. So
I was going to say you could probably credibly call him a gentleman racer.
For sure. I mean, nobody really did it got paid, for a living, I think.
Right.
I always joke Sterling was kind of the first professional, which is true, I think, in behavior, but his dad was, fairly wealthy. He was a dentist. They bought cars. They kind of, in those days, you would have their own team kind of a thing. But yeah, the money needed to come from somewhere for sure.
Yeah, and the whole gentleman racer tag, I mean, some people will take that to mean, well, if you're a gentleman racer, you're not necessarily that serious or that competitive. You're just kind of doing it as a pastime. But Biro was serious about it.
No, he was pretty serious about it. I mean, he was quick enough. He won some races. I think, arguably, voiturette races before World War II, he was probably in the top 3, top 5 drivers of his time. And yeah, I mean, you didn't really there was no sponsorship, period. So you either had money or maybe you drove a factory car, and that was it. And you can say they made a living at it, but I think, like you said, gentlemen, there were people of means, so maybe they would have been, fly fishing or shooting or horse riding, but they picked race car driving.
And this makes me think of a parallel between auto racing and art, which is that neither of these activities were necessarily gainful employment for most of history, and so you needed a wealthy patron behind you.
Yes. To a certain extent, yes. I think you always had patrons of the arts, always. But, I mean, nowadays it might be a little bit different because, the product that you create when you race, it is entertainment, right? You can watch it on Netflix, so you can get paid that way. So you create content. If you create art, if it's like visual art, then you do have something of substance that you can sell. It's true that a lot of artists didn't sell much or became famous after they passed away. But, so there is a parallel. I think, there's the hurdle to art is obviously much lower because by definition, anyone can be an artist. You just have to declare yourself an artist. You can't declare yourself a doctor. So, but that's what is interesting, or that is kind of the thing about art, right? A lot of people say, oh, I could have done that, which is that's not the point ever, right? It's not so much that you say, I could have done it. That's like saying, you could have written Hemingway because you can use a typewriter, right? Again, not the point. The point is that there's an intent behind it.
By the way, do you subscribe to the 10,000 hour theory of mastery?
I guess to some extent it's true. I mean, I grew up being a tennis player. I got a scholarship to play tennis when I came here to the United States, and then I picked up golf, and I got down to scratch in 2 years, but I would hit 800 balls a day. So, and then now I'm doing this, and I don't do anything else. So I guess in a way, yeah, I think it's just at some point you're going to have to do the repetitions, or so it becomes automatic.
Yeah, like they say, don't do it until you can get it right. Do it until you can't get it wrong.
Yeah, it's to some extent that's true about a lot of things.
Yeah. Sport was really important in your early life.
Right. I mean, my parents were always more, obviously, I guess more the cultural pursuits. And I think growing up, in a way, you just don't want to be like your parents. So I kind of picked something else. But now, in the grand scheme of things, I'm back in the family business anyway.
Right. Now, you said you had a tennis scholarship.
Yeah.
Were you good enough to turn pro? Or
no, I mean, I played against some of the people that probably, like the Bryan brothers. I don't know, you may have heard of them. And maybe every once in a while you see someone on television you maybe had something to do with. But it's more like minor leagues, So, I describe it as, better than most, not as good as some. So it's almost kind of, actually now we know it's 3% that make it.
Right.
Of most, and the interesting part is that if you look at the cyclists who win a race, it's 3%. Like the guy in the Tour de France and all this kind of stuff, 3% of cyclists will make a podium. 3% of everyone in the minor leagues will make it to the major. 3% of 10, so it is kind of, I don't know why, it's 97% are just here to make the show, and 3% have a chance. So, the odds are not very good.
I was going to say, when you start to look at the math, it can be really discouraging.
Yeah, I mean, in art, it's probably it's worse, I'm convinced it's 1%, not even 1% of artists make a living in their lifetime selling their artwork and make a living from it. So, the odds aren't good, no matter which way you look at it. But I think, particularly in my case, I was just talking with my wife about this yesterday. I don't think I could do anything else. So it's almost by default, that's the only thing I can actually do.
Did you feel that way even in when you were an undergrad? I mean, obviously you went to Art Center.
Right.
And so that was clearly part of your plan.
Honestly, this was pre-diagnosis. So I was not diagnosed with, the brain disorder that I know I have now. So Art Center to me there's no homework, and this is something I could do. And I know this sounds very silly that you pick a school because of that. And even when I went there, everyone tells you, the admission rate is so low and you have to have a book and this and that. I thought it was pretty easy when I went through the school. But that's because I think I had an affinity for it. And as it turns out, you can argue I did. And ultimately, it ended up being now that we have found out it's literally the only thing that I can stick to and do, because I did try to go into, I don't even want to call it corporate America or have a job with an office, but it just doesn't work. So, and that's again, kind of all pre-diagnosis. Now it might be different, but before that, I just, you just can't stay within the lines. It just doesn't work.
Did it creep up on you? Were there symptoms?
No, my wife said, "You're going to therapy or we're done." I mean, she had it. And, to be fair to her, she experienced a lot because, we've been together almost 15 years at that point. It was 2 years ago. And so, and part of the symptoms of I have ADHD, hyperfocus, dyslexic, and I have an auditory processing disorder. So part of the symptoms are risk-seeking behavior. Working memory is non-existent. Even just trying to explain it to you is difficult for me, because certain things is I can talk immediately about it, and other things are very difficult for me to express. And that's all part of it, because I kind of have the words in my head, but they don't really come out right. And it takes me a very long time to explain something. If you ask me, why is the key on the left in Porsches, I can tell you immediately. But, so that's part of the problem in a way. So,
by the way, not to interrupt you, I see exactly what you're talking about, right. Because prior to us sitting down for the interview, we were talking about a million different things, and right. You had instant access to right. So many facts and interesting anecdotes.
That's the problem, is that in a way, my brain, I can't decide. It's almost like it has a will in its own. Your brain kind of latches onto things that where you find interest, and that's when your brain starts releasing dopamine. And it's almost kind of like an addiction. So you keep doing that thing that feels good, where you feel comfortable and you can express yourself, or you can identify with. With almost 99% of life, I'm completely clueless, because even the harder I try, the worse it gets. Even if I have to fill out a form, My doctor, I went to the doctor's office, and the first thing I did, you fill out the intake form, and I wrote down the correct street address and the wrong street name. Right? And afterwards she goes, wait, where do you live? Because
these don't match.
Right. That doesn't match your check. And, and of course I know where I live, right? And I'm an adult, I should know how to fill out a form. But again, it's just, your brain just kind of, not betrays you, but it just kind of, it's just very little that I'm working with when I'm not doing the 2-3 things I'm really good at in life. So if we're talking about driving or racing, I'm okay. Obviously painting, I'm okay. Or, the history of some of the cars and what interests me. Everything else, I'm just very, very bad at A, expressing, and B, retaining. And it's not because I don't want to. It's just literally, it's not getting in. And it's a very strange thing for someone on the outside to understand and accept and live with. And I think that's what my wife experienced. Because after 15 years of, will you go to the store and please get me lettuce, and I come back with a hammer or maybe with nothing, at some point you just feel like this person doesn't care about me, because how hard is it to put this in the dishwasher, or how hard is it to pick up a sock? I told him 15 times.
Some people would probably say you're just a regular guy.
I think there's a difference a little bit, because it's not that I don't try. And I think that some of the difference is that none of it has a malicious intent. It's not that I want to be, make you feel like you don't exist.
Or inconsiderate.
Inconsiderate, yeah. It's literally, it's just not getting in, And so, yeah, so the impetus for, you ask, what's the impetus? The impetus was my wife says, you need to go to therapy. And as it just happens, again, I think I lucked out. I happened to, my doctor, Dr. Sandra Brown, she just happens to be specializing in this particular affliction. She studied it since the, mid-70s, the 80s, which is, again, ADHD is not that old. It's before that, it was a kid's disease.
And that's by the way, that's how I think
most
of it.
People, yeah, most people think, oh, it's the kid who's got too much energy, he's bouncing off the walls. That's one way of looking at it, right? It could also be the kid who's very quiet and always by himself. That was me.
There's a correlation, though, between ADHD and dyslexia and super creative people.
I think so, because a lot of, because I used to work in advertising, so in the creative department in that agency, I think if you go into that bullpen, most people will have that affliction, because that's where you just end up by default, because we can't do spreadsheets. We don't know how to work Excel. We just, and it doesn't matter how many times you try to teach us. Some things will just, it's like you could speak in Chinese. I just don't understand what you're talking about. And it's not that I don't want to. It's so difficult.
So your path in life is almost like a marble swirling down a funnel.
In a way, you kind of take the path of least resistance. Yeah. It's like, oh, I think you can do this. So when I started painting, kind of the reason I started painting in 2006 is I wanted some artwork for my own walls. So I looked around, I couldn't really find anything. I had it in my mind what I wanted, which it was kind of like my grandfather wrote with Porsches, because I like Porsches. I couldn't find it, so I just painted 4 paintings. And I showed them for a friend of mine in Switzerland, and he bought them immediately. So I thought, okay, well, 4 for 4 is not bad. Let's paint a couple more. And then it's by word of mouth, it just kind of kept going. And a year later, with the help of my wife, I kind of, stopped working at the agency and just been painting ever since. And so, yeah, it's not something that I said to myself, that's the career path I'm going to take. I think people with that affliction, unfortunately, they get bounced around a lot. And unfortunately, if you were to go and do an interview now to, a jail or a prison, I'm guessing 90% of people have that affliction because they don't have a safety net. I luckily come from a good family, so even though I flunked out in school, I could go to another school or, take another test and that kind of stuff. But
you got second chances.
I got second chances, and a lot of people don't, especially, when you don't even have a chance to begin with. So, and coupled with low impulse control,
By the way, I would not guess that about you at all. When we walked in the door today, you seem to be one of the most reserved, mild-mannered, friendly, quiet guys.
Yeah, I mean, lots of it has to do now with, I'm practicing mindfulness in general. But to be fair, there were a couple of topics we talked about where I had to bite my tongue. If my wife would have been here, she would have said, don't say anything.
For example?
Well, I don't want to mention names, but...
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's still there. In the past, I would have said something for sure. And I know that when I was working, call it corporate America, we have clients like Toyota or Procter & Gamble, who I guess are more like blue chip companies, right? And so if you would have a certain decorum that was necessary, whether it's speech or what you wear, dress codes, and that for me was just so difficult. It's not that you just, couldn't help it.
By the way, this might not make the cut, but were you afraid of offending me?
No, not you, the other people.
I see. You were restraining yourself from throwing shade.
Yeah, I guess that's
okay.
One way of putting
it.
Well,
you know what? I think most of us need to do that a little bit more.
Right.
To be fair.
I'm sure, yeah, because the world we live in now, I think the problem with me is that sometimes it's the first thing that pops into my head. And a lot of times why people like me get in trouble is that we don't have that filter, so it just blurts out and you go like, oh, great, here we go.
By the way, just out of curiosity, is social media good, bad, or indifferent to your particular?
For my mental health, in general, I view it as kind of a megaphone. So for me, it's just stuff that goes out, right? I don't necessarily, I know I'm not good at all with engaging and I could do so much more and we could be so much bigger, but I just don't care because, to my mind, I've always considered myself a worker, whatever I was doing, if I'm racing or if I was doing sports or now with painting.
Here's the thing about social media. I think it's driving most of us a little bit crazy.
For sure.
I think it's definitely damaging, like as you say, a social decorum, certain rules of the road in terms of engaging with other people. People do things on social media they would never do to your face.
Right. Obviously, there's a lot of things. Again, my footprint isn't huge, right? I think at most it's 50,000 people, like across all the platforms. So we're not talking millions of people. Right. And obviously, people will say silly things. It's true. I have never in my life had anyone say anything to me in person. And I'm friends with Mike Brewer, who has literally millions of people. And he said the same thing to me. Never in his life has anyone walked up to him and said, I wish you get cancer. However, some, as we know, keyboard warriors, they will say that. So that's one thing, right? The other thing is I personally look at social media more as a megaphone, right? For me, it's a one-way street. It's going out.
You're expressing yourself. Yes. You're not really taking in.
I'm not really interacting, which I know is kind of the social aspect of it. And I know we could be more successful, the brand, myself, whatever, the following, if there were to be more engagement. But I have always considered myself a worker, whether, if it's racing or playing tennis or golf or with painting, the same thing. So to me, the work is important and interesting and pushing myself, doing new things. So if I have the choice between spending time answering questions or getting back to people on social media or working, I'll always work. So, well, I don't know what that says about me, or about social media, but I just, I think it's a marketing tool.
Well, I think your priorities are just probably in order, and that it's as simple as that. Now, within about 5 minutes of chatting with you when we first arrived, it was obvious you had an encyclopedic knowledge of sports car racing history and Porsche, obviously. When you started painting, because you wanted something to hang on your own wall, did all that just start to pour out on the canvas?
Actually, no, because pretty quickly, I've been commissioned to do things. So in a way, I don't get to pick my subject matters anymore. So a lot of the knowledge specifically goes into kind of something you're tasked to do, which is, it's part of the job, right? And actually, I think last year we realized that I haven't done a painting for myself in 10 years. Because
Wow.
everything has been a commission, a t-shirt, a film, whatever, right? But I haven't just painted something for myself. So, so when you say, does the knowledge pour out? I guess it doesn't. It goes to a certain extent about the certain things I'm tasked to do, but not necessarily my personal, interests, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Which kind of brings me back to, I'm curious about, you said earlier that, of course, like about 1% of artists, if you're lucky.
I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Become commercially successful
Right.
or make any money at
Right.
it. Did it hit for you early? Did you just feel like you maybe you resonated early and
Right.
it began to...
I think part of it is my background too, at that point, because I think if you want to accuse me of being one thing, if you said to me, here's someone who knows their value, I think that's fair. Maybe too much to a certain point, but I think that's always been part of, my family's upbringing, that in my family, being able to paint or play music, that was like a currency in a way, right? And somebody else's family, it's like a hobby. He's mucking about. Whereas in my family, so I always viewed it as, even when I made my first sale, I set a price, they counted a little bit lower and I sold it. But, and I don't remember what it was. It was maybe $2,000 or $1,500 a painting, right, for my first canvas.
Not a lot of money.
No, not life-changing money by any means.
No.
But I didn't give it away for $500 or for, I give you $100. Right? Because I just, intuitively I knew, no, it's worth more than that. It's not, I can't say I want 10 grand for it because I know there's no track history, nobody knows who I am. So that, fair enough. But I still didn't give it away. And I think even that very first sale to me, or now you look back on it, I think that's part of where I came from, because I knew there was an intrinsic value to it.
Do you remember the point at which you realized, hey, I've got momentum here and my phone's ringing?
Not really. Not that I could pinpoint it. I think I got lucky. There's two things at play. One, I developed my own style very early on, and I kind of figured it out. And there were people even back then who would say, oh, don't do that. It's not going to work. Nobody wants it. And I think to my credit, I stuck to it. The other thing is that, so going back to that, is that I think what worked or what helped in my favor is that if you see one of my paintings, even if you walk from the outside and you just see in, I think you can recognize it immediately. I think that's a good thing for me, because that kind of that's part of the brand, right?
Absolutely.
The recognition, okay. So I had that going for myself. The other thing I had going, and I guess that's luck, is that I had certain key, collectors or enthusiasts who liked my work and started building up their collection around their cars as well. And some of them did quite well. There was one gentleman who kind of built a private museum, so to speak, with his cars, and eventually he sold the cars and he sold the building, and the building was sold with the artwork in it. That's how much they wanted it.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's weird. Everything has always been a pull. Every client we've ever had, even later on, once we started doing corporate things between, James Hunt and McLaren and Porsche Design and the museum and golf, all these things, they were all phone calls to us. I've never reached out to anyone.
That's an enviable position.
Yeah, I suppose. I think now looking back at it, I wish I would have done fewer things for sure. I think I think we've done too many projects, and I wish I would have done fewer of them.
Why do you say that?
Just because the experience, what happened is they took me away from painting, because it got to the point towards the end, pre-pandemic, like 17, 18, where I was running around so much and, doing TV shows and this and that, and should you do that? And I wasn't painting anymore, and it was all about shoes and, and clothes and traveling, and then we had a sister company in Europe and going back and forth all the time. And you don't paint anymore. And
it becomes all about brand, and
it was too much for my taste, you know.
Well, I think that's a good segue to talk about your style and technique. And you know, I don't know a whole lot about art. I know what I like. I like your stuff, and to me, when I look at it, I immediately thought, of course, of period racing posters.
Right.
But the other thing it made me think of immediately, bullfighting posters.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's the same time period in a way, right? I mean, bullfighting posters, the political posters from the 30s, you know, travel posters from the 30s, very colorful. They all kind of have the same style that was necessitated by the technology, or the limiting factor was the printing. So you would have lithographs with stone plates, and you would only use 3 or 4 different colors. And my grandfather kind of, you know, worked in that world as well. And so when I started painting, I thought, why not do, you know, you kind of emulate that style using, you know, a bold background color, and we add black, white, gray, and some accent touches. And I just felt it was visually more impactful, especially on a larger scale, as opposed to, you know, not to denigrate people who use watercolors or oil, or, you know, who use halftones, but I just felt this was a bolder approach, and that's why I like doing it.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's cool about your style is it kind of fools you, because at first you do think that's a lithograph.
Right.
And then you get close to the painting and you realize, no, those are brush strokes. That's
right.
all hand done. And so there's it's clever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess it pulls you in from that point of view. And the other thing is, you know, like just in terms of style, that, you know, you don't close all the lines, you don't connect everything. So in a way, it kind of draws the viewer in, because your mind kind of makes the connections between the lines that are interrupted. So you're kind of engaged, as opposed to if I gave you all the information, you would go like, okay, got it, right? But here you kind of get to play along and figure things out. And the other thing is that I don't necessarily use photography to start out with, because then I'm using somebody else's work, and you as a filmmaker, lenses distort everything. So you can always tell if a car has been shot with a long lens because the rear wing is bigger, but the rear wing should be smaller. The front wing should be bigger because it's closer to you, right? So, like, you know, which fist is bigger? It's the one that's closer to you. So once, you know, it's kind of forcing the perspective on things, just to me felt more engaging.
Do you start out with laying pencil lines down and then your colors and layers, or how does that work?
I mean, I sketch a lot. So by the time I start painting on canvas, I have a good idea of what I'm going to do, especially with clients where I do commissions. A lot of them like to see what they're getting first. And so when I sketch, I tend to, sketches nowadays, it's really, sometimes it's as little as a Post-it sketch that starts an idea, and then I make it bigger. Eventually, I'll take it in a computer, I'll scan it in, and the computer just helps me to explore things quickly. So if I want to change the background from blue to red, I don't have to do a new sketch, right? You can just change the background. If I did the sketch by hand, I would have to do the whole thing again. So the computer is a great tool when you kind of start selecting options and moving things around. And then once I have that settled, you extrapolate, you know, a smaller sketch onto a bigger canvas, and you just use grid lines. So it's like satellites. You know, you go, if you have 5 lines on a small piece of paper and you have 5 lines on a big canvas, if at a certain intersection you have a line that goes through, it'll go through at the same place on the big canvas. And that's pretty much, that's my grandfather did it the same way. The projectors don't work for me personally because it's a round lens, everything gets distorted. So I just tend to do it that way.
When you say projector, you mean like you could project your sketch onto
I'm sure some people project onto a wall and trace, but to me personally, I don't use projectors because it's a round lens, right?
Yeah.
As you know,
there's distortion.
There's distortion. I don't care what you're trying to tell me. It's a round lens.
Now, was the large format an immediate thing? I'll just tell people, for those of you listening on the podcast and not watching us on YouTube, the painting to my right is about 19
feet across, 8 feet tall.
Okay. Yeah, I should just ask you instead of guessing, right? And the one behind you,
that is, I think it's 10 feet tall.
And at least 6 feet wide.
Yeah, 7 feet tall. Yes. 7 feet wide, yeah.
7 feet wide, yeah. They're immediately impressive just because of the size alone.
Right. Obviously, there's certain technique aspects. In a weird way, on a bigger canvas, I've done murals, there's 50 feet across. And I discovered you don't have to be that accurate because you're going to view it from 20 feet away, right? So how accurate do you have to be if you're looking at something from 20 feet away? So in a way, that frees you up a bit. I think there's a sweet spot for me that I kind of like to work in because, very, very, like this piece is, 19 feet wide. It takes a long time just because even just moving this canvas up a foot, right? It's not, it weighs about 100 pounds. So it takes a bit of a long time just because of the sheer size of it. And also, once you paint a curve, you have to take a couple of steps back because you're too close to it. So if you're working on something smaller, you don't necessarily have to step back all the time. So those, if you do it for 8 hours a day, it starts to add up, right? Every time you step back, and you have to come back to it. So really, really big pieces obviously slow you down again, and a little bit different technique. Smaller pieces, you need to be a little bit more accurate, just because the room for error is small. I mean, on the watch dial, you really can't make any mistake, just because everything goes out of whack immediately because it's so small. And
by the way, again, for people just listening, the piece that Nick's talking about that's 19 feet long is the Paris-Dakar Rally 1985. The star of the piece is the Rothmans Porsche 959, and there's a helicopter shooting video in the distance, and there are Bedouins with camels, and there's a DC-3, and the car's just streaking across the desert with kicking up a huge cloud of dust. Really cool imagery.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of stuff in this painting. And just, I don't know if this is because of my brain disorder, but everything in the painting is completely accurate. So I actually researched the cloud formations in Dirkou or Agadez, and this is the actual helicopters, the Forerunner. This is the first Eurocopter that they used.
Yeah, A-Star.
Yeah, A-Star. And this particular DC-3 with that tail number actually flew in the 80s as a transporter for the Dakar. And I tracked down one of the pilots so he could tell me the tail number. And the dresses that the natives are wearing, these are actually the dresses and the patterns that they use. They're hand dyed. The reason that the Bedouin with the camel, he's wearing a blue robe, and they're called les bleus, and they use sea urchin to dye their robes. And then through the sun, it actually stains their skin blue. That's why they're called the blues.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So everything in this painting, right, is just...
It's accurate.
Yeah, because to my mind, obviously this photo doesn't exist, but it still pulls you into the history. And I actually had a friend of mine who was part of the Paris-Dakar Rothmans team. He was in the truck, one of the MAN trucks, supply trucks. And when he looked at it, he goes like, yeah, that's what it looked like. And to me, that's like, okay, I got it right. At least for him, even if you don't know, for me, it's important that if you do know what you're talking about, it is correct. And I think you experience that when you go into your podcast, when you have certain subject matters, you talk about David Brown or John Wyer, you do want to get these things right. Even if a lot of people, to them, it might be their first exposure. I think that's what makes what you do good. It's a bit like what Nike had this 99 and 1% rule. They want to be appealing to 1% of the people. The other 99% don't care, but they can see your effort. But the 1% appreciate exactly what you're doing. And I think, to me, that's important for something I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I don't know how you feel about, what you do, but
100%.
Okay.
And I don't talk about myself too much, but I will say that I'll get the tingles, you know, because I really am passionate.
You've been there, right?
I've been there, and I'm passionate about this stuff. People know.
Right.
So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And by the way, I just want to mention one more thing about this piece, which is that there's a whole lot of action going on in the piece, but there's also really, you convey how empty the desert is.
That's kind of the, you know, I mean, that was done on purpose. So on the left, you have the car and a helicopter. On the far right, you have a plane. In between, there's a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've been to the desert, but if you are in the middle of nowhere, it goes on for a long while, right? And you want to convey that. So yeah, it's 19 feet across, but for a good portion of it, it's just sand. Because if you do the burrito car, there is just sand at some point.
It reminds me of the line in Lawrence of Arabia. I think his superior officer is asking Lawrence, what is it you like so much about the desert? He can't understand why he's gone native. And Lawrence says, it's clean.
Yeah.
It's like that emptiness, you know. I've actually spent a lot of time in Death Valley, four-wheeling and stuff. I love it out there. But I've also been to the desert in southern Peru, north of the Atacama, which is Chile.
Okay.
But amazing emptiness.
Right.
And it's so static.
Right.
If you don't have rain and you have, you know, basically your only phenomenon is wind, things change very little.
Yeah. Yeah. And you feel so small.
Yeah. Very cool piece.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you're painting in acrylic, right?
Yeah.
And
exclusively.
Yeah. And it's really easy to work with acrylic, isn't it?
Yeah. It's water-based. It dries. It's light-proof, waterproof, smear-proof. It's flexible. You can roll up a canvas. It works really well for me, because my grandfather, he painted with oils mainly, and I just can't inhale turpentine for 10 hours a day. You know, that's not a good thing. And also my painting style, I deal in absolutes. I don't have any halftones.
Can you just explain halftones?
A halftone, for instance, if you are painting in oil, the paint itself is a solvent. Because the paint itself contains a solvent. So if you put red down and you put yellow over it,
you're going to get orange.
Get orange a little bit. You might have yellow in the center, but towards the edge you might get orange. So because every time you touch something, you do it with a solvent.
Right.
Acrylic paint, once it's dry, it's dry. So
there's no gradients.
Exactly. Yeah, that has never been me. Maybe that's part of my personality. Again, you know, it goes back to the Art Deco posters, the bullfighting posters. They didn't have too many screens or plates, right? So they had black and white, but they wouldn't put the halftone in between. Now, when you print with an inkjet printer, you can just put in the dots in between, but you didn't have that. So they were limited to the amount of different values or colors they could use.
It may just be the way your brain. No, I mean, seriously,
you're right, because my wife always laughs. There's no gray with you. You know, it's either in or out, or I like it or I don't like it, or I want to do it or I don't want to do it. There's no.
Well, listen. I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, the expression analysis is paralysis.
Yes.
You know, I think a lot of us are sort of afflicted by that. So maybe you don't have to deal with that.
That is true. You know, and you know, sometimes they say your interest is a mile wide and an inch deep. Mm-hmm. I think mine is the opposite. It's an inch wide and a mile deep.
Right.
So there's a certain couple of things that I really get into. You know, whatever, if it's painting or racing or something, and I tend to focus on those and work on those things. But I'm literally rubbish at anything else. Don't ask me who is in the movies or whose song that is or who that person is. I don't know. You're
a specialist, not a generalist.
Correct.
Have you ever done those online personality tests?
What do you mean, like in...
Well, you know, you can go online to whatever website and answer 20 questions or 30 questions. And
I mean, I've done it recently for ADHD. But,
right. They're fun sometimes.
Okay.
I don't know how much it really reveals about oneself, but...
Right. Well, I mean, I know I'm an introvert, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tend to... It's just, you know, again, with my brain, it's a lot of things that don't get through. And frighteningly, very little gets through. To the point where I could drive by something and never notice it.
Nick, what do you want to tell other people about mental health? Having gone through your own experience and you're kind of coming out the other side, you've been in therapy, you're experiencing healing, but it's an ongoing process, right?
For sure.
So what do you want others to know?
I mean, it's weird. It's weird for me to say, if you feel that you need help, you should get help. Because part of the problem with my affliction is that everybody around me knew I had a problem, but I didn't know. It's almost, that's kind of the weird part. So it's almost kind of like you need to, maybe the awareness part is if you know someone who has a certain type of behavior, maybe it could just be something like that. Because they're always, people are kind of sometimes being written off like, oh, he's an odd duck or he's weird or, I don't understand what's happening. Because not the weird part, but since people have known this about me, a lot of people have told me, oh, you know what, your behavior makes so much more sense now. And they feel more at ease with me because now they understand that maybe they wouldn't have taken something personally, or I don't know, whatever I may or may not have done. So I think, obviously, if you need help, then there's nothing wrong and you should get help, and but I think part of it might also be that just in general, to create an awareness that that's what it could be, that certain brains are just wired differently, and the world is in general, it makes total sense. You go with what most people have. That's the default, right? And unfortunately, if everybody's around, the square doesn't fit in. So,
well, the other thing too is, we all have questions about ourselves. We all have self-doubt, or we wonder why we do the things we do. And, I think it's natural. But when you can't find answers, maybe you need to have somebody else help you find those answers.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I don't know who said it, but someone said, if you say, I don't know, it's the smartest thing you can say, is because you are looking for knowledge and you're intellectually curious.
How has your life been positively impacted by therapy and just the recognition that, hey, I got to work on this?
Oh, it saved our marriage for sure.
Your wife was kind of at the end of her rope.
She, for sure. And also, I don't think our lives were tenable the way they were going, because I think, and also I was just, it's very hard to explain, but it's almost like you're going on a roller coaster or a merry-go-round and you're just hanging on for dear life all the time. And after a certain amount of time, it just becomes exhausting in a way, and it's just not feasible. You just can't maintain it. Mm-hmm. Or if you do maintain it, there's too many things that just fall by the wayside. For me, it's been a 2-year process where now, not that I'm never cured, but I feel a little bit better, but it takes a long time to, gain the awareness, understand it intellectually, and then emotionally, which is not the same thing. And everyone does that at a different speed, even between my wife and I. So I think, it's done a huge difference, and hopefully it'll actually lead for me to better work or a better life moving forward. Because I guess that for me, I hope that's the goal for a lot of people.
You happier now?
That's a weird question, because the concept of happiness, it's hard to explain or to define. I think it's also maybe a cultural thing, because in Europe no one talks about happiness. That's a very American thing.
It totally is. Well, I know, I agree. It's a weird question. That's kind of why I asked it, because I sometimes wonder, and this is very philosophical for a car podcast, but I kind of wonder if any of us really knows what happiness is. Contentedness.
Right. I was going to say, if you're content with yourself or, your station or what you do in life or the impact you have, I think that's something to strive for. I know certain activities that make me happy. But yeah, I feel I'm in a better place now than I was 2 years ago, for sure, before I started this journey.
I'm glad.
Yeah, that for sure. Especially just because, just the relationship between my wife and myself, it's more of it's more of an actual relationship than it was before, because before it was just madness. And I actually do believe it leads to better work.
Good. So in addition to your paintings and your studio space here, you've got 2 long hood 911s.
Yes, there's a 68T Sports Purpose and a 69 that's being built.
Yeah, and then you've got a really fantastic replica 550 Spider shell sitting here.
Yes.
Chassis and shell.
Yes, it's basically an aluminum Spider that's sitting here that once the 69 is done, I think that's the next project, so I'm going to finish that. And then next to the Spider, we have a 69 Lotus 51C, which is a Formula Ford. And and outside you saw the R car, the GT3.
GT3,
that's a
right?
backdate. So a couple of cars, yes.
Tons of projects here. Is wrenching as therapeutic to you as painting?
Yes and no. What I enjoy about working on the cars is if I get to solve a problem. So I guess that's part of the creativity. So, anything to do with metalwork or welding or making a one-off piece, or like on the GT3, like re-engineering the entire windshield wiper system where, you have to do the math and make your own levers and arms and pivot points and all that. I think, to me, that's kind of the interesting part.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that project?
We can. I mean, it's really going into the weeds. I mean, you mean just generally about the art car in general?
So there's a 996 sitting out front.
Yes.
And you thought, I want to do something different. So you're recreating a car that Porsche, it was a one-of-one car, right?
Well, no, actually, Porsche never built it.
Oh, they never built it. Okay.
So in my mind, they came out with the 996 GT3 RS in Europe.
Right.
And there's a couple of them here. Before that, they had the MK1 GT3R. And to my mind, the 996 GT3 RS is a little bit soft, to my mind, because I've driven, like if you compare it to what an RSR and RS used to be, 73, 75, those are kind of raw cars. It's loud. They're almost race cars for the street. Obviously, in 1999 or 2004, you can't really do that anymore. But in spirit, they still felt a little bit demure to me. So I thought, what if Porsche had built a GT3R in 1999, built one car, and the board looked at it and said, no, you're crazy. We can't sell this. There's no traction control. There's no Porsche stability management. It's too loud. There's no radio. There's no sunroof. All the suspension's too harsh. We can't sell this. And then later on, they came out with the RS, which was a little, it's still a nice car. You could almost daily drive that car. So I started out with this idea of doing an art car where I trade the entire build in exchange for my artwork. So the first trade was I traded 2 paintings for a GT3 04. And so I was looking for a white car. I found one in Nova Scotia, and we drove it from Nova Scotia to California.
Wow, that must have been a great trip.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
And then we stopped. I have some friends at Virginia International Raceway, and I kind of wanted to set the benchmark because after the car's done, I'm going to go back. So since I knew the people at Virginia International Raceway, I asked them, if I give you a print for for the restaurant they have there, could I take some laps on the track by myself just to get a baseline? Because I've been there a bunch of times, and I said yes. So again, I traded art, so I get to do the track. So now I know how fast the car is in stock form. And then since it's been here, it's taken longer than I would have thought, but again, that's just what life is. So I've done the engine, so now we're up to maybe like 300 honest horsepower, and exhaust, re-geared the entire gearbox. So we rebuilt the entire gearbox, shorter ring and pinion, went through all the gears, new bearings, the whole thing. Traded for wheels. So we got BBS E88s, and we got proper brakes, Paget pads, so they squeak. And eventually, I'll do all the body, pretty much each body panel is going to get touched. It's going to get a cup 100-liter fuel tank. So we're going to have to rip out the old fuel tank. So I get a long-range fuel tank, which wasn't available in that car anyway. And I got someone who can reprogram the gauges. So the fuel gauge is going to work because you get a bigger tank. Sure. So it's just like everything. at the end, it's going to look like a factory prototype car.
Very cool.
But it never existed. So that's kind of my thing, because I thought, why not?
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, it's very...
And I don't have money, that kind of money to throw around, I can trade.
Right. And yeah, there's something to be said for building it yourself. Now, you're not really a purist, are you?
What do you mean in terms... I mean, what's your definition of
I know
purist?
it's a loaded question.
Right.
You're not one of these guys, these white glove purists.
Okay. We're talking Concours, like Q-tips and things like that?
Yeah, which I get, there's a place for that, but also, so one of the cool things about the Porsche world in the last, let's say 20 years, and really the last 8 to 10 years is there's been a wider acceptance of interpretation and personalization of cars.
Right.
So, like, for example, the 550 Spider here, if it were mine, I would go as correct as can be and as authentic as can be. But with this 911 Sports Purpose here, there's some room to play around.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because technically everything is exactly as it should be.
Oh.
Because in 1967, Porsche released a little booklet, and it's called Manual for a Sports Purpose Manual, and they gave you the guidelines how to modify your car if you went circuit racing or rally racing. And it tells you the part numbers you're supposed to use. So it has a loud exhaust, the roll bars in there. They tell you to take the carpet out. So technically, the 69 I'm building exactly like they would have if in 69 you went circuit racing in Group 3, for instance, So the engine, ripped out everything that's not supposed to be in it. You have the simple roll bar. We have the correct Koni shocks. We got the brakes, So in a way, it's not purist in terms of that's not how it left the factory, and I couldn't win a Concours where I'm supposed to have a stock car. To my mind, it's completely correct for what I would have done with this car in 1969 and what the Porsche factory did in 69 when they modified cars.
Right.
So in a way, yes and no.
Well, and you can at least appreciate the wider Porsche world.
For sure. I mean, I think that's very interesting, especially in the just if you mention Porsche, because Porsche has all these little subcultures where you have 964 guys who ride on low on gold star rims, which I didn't know that was a thing, but evidently it is. And you get the Rauwelt guys, and then you have the R Group guys, and then you have the new GT3 RS guys, and then you have the long hook guys, and you have the short hook guys, right? And you have the turbo guys. So, and you get the 912 guys. So you have all these little groups that are all kind of like satellites that all have their diehard fans. And it's very unique to this particular brand because you couldn't go, okay, I'm into Ferraris. There's no, here are the Dino, I mean, maybe you got the Dino guys, right? And maybe you have, before Enzo's dead and after Enzo's dead. But by and large, they're Ferrari guys. There's no 22 different clubs with, oh no, we only have long hoods and it stops at 1973. And you don't have that with BMWs, right? You maybe have a couple of pockets. Okay, those are the 2002 guys, or you have M1 guys, but they only have 4 collectible cars anyway. There's a 328, and you got the E30 guys, right?
Right.
And you got the M3s, but then that's it.
And the 2002 guys.
And the 2002 guys. But,
and the E9 Coupe guys.
Okay, E9
There's
Coupe,
a few.
or maybe the Z1 guys or something like that, right? Yeah. But again, it's not like the Porsche world. We have, you have like 30 different people who are running around. They all have their own T-shirt and their own logo and their club and their website and their bulletin board. So that's very unique about the Porsche, that it gave birth to all these subgenres of clubs.
By the way, that would be a great painting. You need to do a huge the taxonomy of Porsche files.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Right.
There's a lot of squares in that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
That would be fun.
Yeah, that not a bad idea.
Maybe I'll take this out of the episode so that we can retain intellectual property on that. What about driving? We haven't talked much about driving, but I know you said you took some laps at VIR and
yeah. I mean, obviously I raced a Lotus,
right?
So I have my, I went with SCCA. So initially I went to Skip Barber in Laguna, so that's where I got my license, and then I started racing, and I just like driving. We have a lot of good driving roads, and I mean, the thing about the Porsches. Why I connect with them is that once, in a weird way, once you've driven race cars, you get back into a street car, it ruins all the street cars for you, because any regular car or street car after a race car feels like a parade float.
Yes.
I mean, because the very first time I went to Laguna, I drove up there in my Boxster, and I drove in a crappy race car, and you get back in the Boxster, and the Boxster feels so slow, and it's so heavy, and the brakes are mushy, and on your way to the track, you felt so great, you're in a Boxster, now you're driving home, you're like, oh my God, this is awful. Of all the cars I've ever driven, the early 911s are the only ones where you get back in the car, and it still kind of feels like, okay, the step isn't so big. You still kind of get a rawness, the vibration, the brakes are progressive. It does what you want it to do. So from that point of view, to me, the step from a race car to a street car, and the 911s is smaller than the other cars. So that's why I kind of like the Porsches, or specifically the early 911s. But yeah, I mean, racing, I think it's, to me, it's a bit like painting or sports, it's another way to express yourself, to measure yourself against other people in a way. Because, I mean, I guess painting, it's not necessarily a competitive activity, but in my mind, I always want to be, better than anyone else. So,
Of course. By the way, that comparison that you made between street cars and race cars, the other day I was watching an interview with the great Jim Clark.
Yes.
And the interviewer was asking him what he drove,
right,
what his personal car was. And Jim didn't say much. He said, it's an automatic.
Right.
And the guy was surprised.
Right.
And Jim his whole point was, it's not a race car.
Right.
I just needed to get me from,
Yeah.
And you spend as much time in a race car as Jim Clark did. It doesn't really matter what what you have on the street. Yeah.
I mean, Sterling told me that for a while he drove a van because in London he could park it anywhere.
Right.
So he'd just go up on the sidewalk, run inside, and come back out.
Sure.
Leave the blinkers on.
Making a delivery.
Right.
It's smart.
Just drive a van all the time.
Love it. What kind of guy was he?
Sterling, he was, I mean, interestingly enough that you should ask me this because I'm working on a book now, so I just remembered the story and I wrote it down. When I did a painting, Lady Susie commissioned a painting of him in the RS Spider, and it ended up being his last, kind of race at Laguna, 2010. And he looked at the painting, and then he kind of zeroed on himself, and he just said, "Oh, it's so simple. It doesn't take much, but it's me." Because it was just a couple of squiggles and black, white, and white highlight with gray, black. And I thought that was always a good compliment to me because he recognized himself immediately. But it was done very simple, he just thought, oh, that's weird. It doesn't take much, but it's me. Undeniably, it's me. So I guess that doesn't answer your question how he was. I found him to be very interesting because he also knew my granduncle Bira. And so invariably, every once in a while, he'd pull me aside and kind of whisper a colorful story that you probably couldn't tell in mixed company anymore. And in a way, that kind of brought me closer, And it was just, he's I mean, again, he is a legend. He's almost kind of like your prototypical legend, kind of like you have Jackie Stewart now, It's almost...
Absolutely.
They're walking legends. So I consider myself very fortunate that I could spend, we spent time here. Obviously met him in the UK. We saw him at Goodwood, and every time we saw him, he was always, always very passionate.
So it's okay to meet your heroes from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially with those older, with drivers from that generation, they're not necessarily set for life. They survived something. It's almost kind of like a war hero, and for the rest of their life, they still had to do, a lot of them still had to do something. It's not like now you win a race and that's it, you're set, or sponsorships didn't pay that much, or you weren't a brand ambassador for life. So a lot of these guys just kind of kept working. So they were still very much almost kind of the same people that they were back then.
Well, another guy that comes to mind is Vic Ilford.
Sure, yeah. I spent a lot of time with Vic. He was, he never suffered fools gladly with everyone.
I've heard that.
But once you kind of got the metal of you and you knew you weren't a clown or, you weren't wasting his time, he was very nice. He is very direct. And, you could almost kind of tell why his career went the way it went. But he was always quick. That kind of was his, I don't want to say it was his saving grace, but he was very, very quick, obviously. And super talented, very diverse. I mean, who wins a rally and then goes to Le Mans? There's not too many people who either you're driving on loose surfaces or you're on a circuit.
Right.
But he drove on anything.
Yeah.
And he was fast. I mean, he was quick.
Nick, what's next for you? What do you got going on?
More painting.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of Corvettes next. So a lot of yellow. Racing Corvettes, and I got 20 more hoods that I'm doing. And then the regular stuff that I do throughout the year, smaller commission or like some corporate things that are like 4 times a year kind of deals. And hopefully, we'll get back on the road, get back on the track eventually. So
fantastic. If people want to connect with you,
go to the website, I guess. It's just my first and last name.com, nicolashunziker.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook, obviously. That's easy to find, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always put links in the show notes so people could just go into the show notes and click. Nick, thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you for having me. I mean, it was fun. I enjoy your show. I think it's... I just like the history aspect, as you can tell. So I think, diving into these subject matters that people haven't done before is always interesting. And it helps, in general, to keep the hobby alive, for the next generation.
Well, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and support the show and tell your friends, write a review. All of that helps me reach more gearheads like you. I'll see you back here on Wednesday, June 29th for a conversation with one of my favorite writers from the glory days of Automobile Magazine. And he's working on a new book called The American Automobile, From Flivver to Furious. My guest will be veteran automotive journalist Ronald Ahrens. That's in 2 weeks, so until next time, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.